We read about Avram Avinu. He was circumcised at the age of 99. A man at that age to be circumcised wasn't simple. And he was slightly infirm. And the Torah tells us that on the third day of circumcision, which is the most difficult day of recovery, Hashem paid a sick visit. And the Torah identifies the location which he paid the sick visit, Beiloni Mamre. It was the plains of Mamre. Why did Hashem visit him in the plains of Mamre? Hushanoslo Eitz Alamilo. Because he's the one who advised him to be circumcised. Lefichach niglo olav bechelko. Therefore Hashem appeared to Avram in his portion. I mean, did Avram Avinu take it under advice whether he should be circumcised or not? God said he should circumcise himself. There's not a question. If he had to go into the kiln, he went into the kiln. Whatever he had to do, he did. So what do you mean? He advised him on the Milah. So the Midrash tells us that Avram had three compatriots on their Eshkol Mamre, three people. And he asked them, do you think I should circumcise myself? Just to see where they stand. Of course he was going to circumcise himself. One says, advises him, says, I don't think it's a good idea. Why? Because you just defeated the 4 kings and you killed many of their relatives. Don't you realize when you're going to become infirm, you're going to be vulnerable to their attack? Therefore, it's not a good idea. I don't think you should circumcise yourself. Another one says to him, you realize you're 99 years old. A man at your age to circumcise himself, you realize you're putting your life in jeopardy. It's not a good idea. Mamre says to him, he says, I don't understand. You went to war against 4 kings, the mightiest kings in the world, and Hashem performed miracles for you. Do you have to worry about their relatives? That when you're going to be in a vulnerable state, the relatives are going to come and they're going to destroy you? Or you have to be concerned that you're going to bleed to death because you're 99 years old? If God performed this level of miracle, you have to be concerned. Of course you should circumcise yourself. It's interesting, many years ago, a story happened in Beverly Hills. There was a person, very wealthy man, became a Baal Tshuva. And he joined the Orthodox Shul. So a man who's wealthy, how much does he know about Judaism? He's new to the club, so to say. Just became Baal Tshuva, joined Orthodox Shul. So what do? The first thing they do, because he's a wealthy man, they put him on the selection committee to find a rabbi. Does he know what an Orthodox rabbi is supposed to be? He has no idea. Doesn't know. But because he's wealthy, they put him on the selection committee. This person, when he became a Baal Tshuva, he had a whole collection of all kinds of artifacts from Africa, all idolatrous type of artifacts. So when he made his party that he was become Baal Tshuva, he took a large piece of metal, smashed every one of them in honor of his return to Judaism. That's the way he celebrated. So he's sitting on the committee, and they have different candidates applying for the position. He says, what can I ask? What question should I ask? He asks himself, he says, one question I know I could ask him. Did they believe in God? That's the question to ask him. If he's an Orthodox rabbi, evidently he has to believe in God, okay? So one of them comes, and he says, by the way, do you believe in God? Gets into a whole philosophical dialogue and thesis and at the end of speaking for 25 minutes, he says, yes, I believe in God. Next person comes, next candidate, asks him the same question also. Beats around the bush 20 times, conclusion, yes, I believe in God. Finally, another candidate comes and says, Rabbi, do you believe in God? He says, of course I believe. What kind of question is that? You're asking me if I believe in God? He's the one who got the job. Same idea. Mamre says, what's the question? If God says you should, of course you circumcise yourself. What is there to worry about? He turned the world upside down for you. Every level of miracle he performed on your behalf. You have to worry about people. That was Mamre's clarity. The other ones, they didn't have that clarity. Therefore, it was by learning Mamre. Because Mamre had that level of understanding of who Hashem was. Therefore, but it comes out, Shenoslo Eitz Al Hamila, because he advised them. But what was the advice? Because he himself was directly in contact with God himself in terms of his belief. Therefore, Hashem is in touch with him. Therefore, Hashem appeared in his portion for that same reason. As he was clear, Hashem is very clear. You're there, and therefore I come to you in your portion. The Torah tells us, he was sitting at the entrance of his tent at the hottest part of the day. So Rashi explains, God took the sun out of the sheath, not to bother him with guests, because Avram was involved in hospitality continuously. When Hashem saw that he was pained that the guests were not coming, so God brought angels in human form that they should be the guests. There's a midrash when Sari Menu passed away. So Avram Avinu immediately after he eulogized Sarah, he went to locate a burial plot for her, and he went to the Bnei Ches and says, "I would like you should go to Ephron and make a request on my behalf. I would like the tomb of Machpelah." So he negotiated with Ephron, ultimately paid a fortune for the Mars Machpelah. And Ephron believed that he duped Avram because Ephron didn't know the true worth of what that was, because it was the location where Odom and Chava were buried in that location. And as Rabbeinu Bachya says, that was the location when the soul ascends, it ascends directly from that location. That's where the neshama ascends after it leaves this world. So it was the ultimate location. After he purchases the Mars Machpelah for Sarah Imenu, Hashem says, finally. So how old was Avram when Sarah passed away? 137 years old. He was 10 years older than Sarah Imenu. She was 127. He was 137. So how many years has Avram done chesed until that moment? His whole life. And from the time of circumcision, from 99 until that time, chesed, unceasingly. Hashem says to Avram, now that you bought the burial plot for your wife, Ato lovish b'levushi, you're finally wearing my cloak of chesed. After all these years, now you're finally wearing doing my chesed. Avram's doing his chesed. Avram was world renowned for his hospitality, for his chesed. Why only now that he bought the burial plot for Sarah Imenu is he doing chesed at this moment? Now, Avram Avinu, when he did his hospitality, that's here, when Orchim, the guests weren't coming, he was pained. And so Hashem sent angels in human form. What was his pain? The bread was getting stale in the cupboard. The money was burning a hole in his pocket. Well, what exactly was he pained? So we explained in the past that Avram, he came to recognize God at a certain age, whether he was 3 years old, whether it was 52 years old. What was Avram's mission in life? Avram, it's interesting, last week when we read about Vayovu Hapolit, when the escapee came and informed Avram that his nephew was taken captive by the 4 kings, it says, the Polit, Vayovu Hapolit, V'yaged la'Avram ho'ivri. The only time Avram is identified as Ivri is when the escapee informs Avram that his nephew was taken captive. Why does the Ivri there? Not anywhere else. Chazal tell us what is the meaning of the word Ivri. Hu me'ever echad v'chol kula me'ever hasheni. Avram was one side, the whole world was on the other side. Avram took on the world single-handedly. How could one man change the world, the face of the earth? Avram, his conviction was at a level, and his belief that he could change the face of humanity. Take him from pagans and turn him into monotheists. That's what Avram believed. The Polit, the escapee, believed, as it says, who was the Polit? Who was the escapee? Og Melech HaBashan. He wanted Avram, knowing he's such a fanatic, he'll go to battle, he'll be killed in battle, take Sari Menu as a wife. That was his ulterior motive. Now, but why was he so sure Avram would go to battle? Because he understood that's Avram. Avram is one man against the world, even against the four mightiest kings. But Og didn't understand who Avram was, of who's Avram's backer. And Avram knew who his backer was. That's why he could be the Ivri. So Avram, he was committed. His mission was to bring God into the forefront of existence, to engage with people and turn them into monotheists. And that was his objective. Chazal tell us that just as a tailor, an expert tailor, regardless of what shape the tear is, he can always mend it and darn it exactly to restore it as it should be. Whoever the personality was, genius, whatever it was, he could respond to the questions and the queries and address that person's personality and to convince him to monotheism, and the person would embrace it by the end of the night. So every person Avram did not engage with, that person remained a pagan. So now that Avram is infirm, and now that it's the hottest day in the history of existence, wayfarers are not coming. What does that mean? That means all these pagans who he could have interacted with are going to remain pagans longer, or maybe forever. So what's Avram pained with? So the Chil Hashem, that in God's world, that God is the benefactor, these people are paying their homage to a deity, to an angel, to a power. You know, it's like a person goes, I'll tell you an interesting story. This person, he was a Talmud of mine many years ago, and literally, the amount of years I invested in this person, you can't imagine. He left Manhattan, became a very observant Jew, raised his family properly, and he was successful. So a certain yeshiva honored him. Not a yeshiva honored him. He had a bar mitzvah. And I go to the bar mitzvah. And because he supports certain institutions in Israel, they came in for the bar mitzvah, even paid their tickets to come in. And they spoke at the bar mitzvah. So I was sitting at the bar mitzvah. This is the closest thing. If you teach Torah to your fellow Jew's child, it's like you gave birth to him. That means every aspect of his Torah, I put into him. He calls up everybody to speak. He speaks about everybody's praises. I'm sitting there with my family. Not that I'm an ego seeker. I'm not an honor seeker. Doesn't mention a word about his relationship with me, Yad Avram, anything. Not a word. I felt shocked. I was shocked. I was sick to my stomach. How could you be so unappreciative? Not a word. And the people came from Israel. No, they said, is the man out of his mind? The people who came from Israel said, is the man out of his mind? It ended. The bar mitzvah ended. Did not acknowledge me, did not call me up to speak, to give a bracha, nothing. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. He missed the boat. So afterwards, I had difficulty having a relationship with him. He wanted to have a relationship. He came to ask. I said, how could you be so wrong? How could you miss it to such a degree? How? You give homage to everybody, not that I need your homage. And to me, not even a thank you, nothing. And the hours that you infringed on my family life, where my wife gave up of her time for you, at least thank her. Nothing. You have these pagans. It's God's world. He's the benefactor from A to Z. And who are they? Praises are they singing? That bring their children as human sacrifices to deities. Avram sees this. He cannot tolerate it. The level of Chil Hashem that this is, you can't imagine what Chil Hashem this is. So Avram now can interact with these people to change, give him another understanding. The man is pained. He's being destroyed by this. So here Hashem initially, he causes it to be so hot to give him a respite from hospitality. Now he sees the remedy is worse than anything. Rather than being calm, he's totally pained, consumed by the pain. Hashem sends 3 angels in human form. When he sees them, he gets excited, he runs towards them, prostrates himself. Unbelievable. Hosts them, begs them to accept his hospitality, and engages with them. And he's unaware that they're angels. He thinks they're regularly mortals. Okay? Now, if you read the story, the Torah is very specific in what he did for them. First thing he says to them, Hishanu tachas eitz, lie under the shade of my tree. Rachzu raglechem, wash your feet. Ekcho pas lechem, give you some bread. Vachat tavor, then you go on your way. What he brings out, 3 tongues from 3 calves, hosts them beyond. So the Gemara tells us that in the merit of Hishanu tachos eitz, we merited for 40 years the clouds of glory which protected us. The mitzvah of Sukkah is a derivative of that, because that replaces the clouds of glory. The water is the Be'er Shel Miriam, the wellspring that traveled with us for 40 years, which gave water to the humans, to their flocks, for everything. The man, because he offered his bread, we had the man. Chazal tell us, Lo nidle Torah el ochle man. The man spiritualized us. Because we were spiritualized us, we had a greater capacity to process the Torah. That it made an indelible impact on our lives till the end of time. That was the man. Okay? Now, if Avram wouldn't have been pained for not having guests, for the reason why he was pained, the angels would have come in angel form. They wouldn't have come in human form, because each of them had a mission. One to heal him, one to inform Sari Maid that she's going to have a child, and the other was to go to Sodom and destroy Sodom. They could have come in angel form. So why did they come in human form? Because he was pained that he wasn't able to do hospitality. If he wouldn't have been pained, what would have been? We wouldn't have the clouds of glory, we wouldn't have the mun, and we wouldn't have the wellspring of Miriam. So what precipitated this invaluable fruit? Being pained for Chil Hashem. Because Avram was pained for God's name being desecrated, and he could not tolerate it. That's the reason why they came in human form. Now he's back to hospitality. Offers the shade of his tree, the bread and the water. So it comes out we're only beneficiaries of all this. The whole scenario presented itself only because he was pained, which was rooted in what? In Kavod Shamayim. And it's a sensitivity that God's name is being desecrated. We find Avraham Avinu, when he heard that Sodom was going to be destroyed, he enters into a dialogue with Hashem. Maybe the 50 righteous, the 5 communities. So each community will have 10. So in the merit of the 10 tzaddikim, each community will be saved. The metropolis was Sodom, but there were other, Sodom and Amorah. So Hashem says there are no 50. Maybe the 45. And then he says to Hashem, Anochi Ofer Efer. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn. Really, I really don't even deserve to speak, because I could have been ash. When I went into the kiln, I came out alive. I would have been incinerated. I could have been dust, because if I would have been killed in the battle against the 4 kings, I would have decomposed into dust. Who am I to speak? And he really spoke strongly with God. But why? And he says, Chalilullah. By you doing this, what precipitated this? What was the impetus for Avram to take God to task? Maybe not to destroy Sodom. You know what he was worried about? Chil Hashem. What's the world going to say? The world says, sure, God destroys the world with the great flood. Don't you think there were tzaddikim there? Again, repeating the same behavior. How's it possible? You have 5 communities. You know it's 10 tzaddikim. Hashem, I'm concerned about Chil Hashem. Your name's going to be desecrated. What are people going to say? Chas v'sholem. They can say God is an ogre. Chas v'sholem. What are they going to say? If that should be said, it's something which cannot be accepted. If I'm trying to avoid that from happening. So what was the driving force within Avram? Kavod Shamayim. Only God's glory. That's what it was. After he defeated Sodom, this king of Sodom, and this was a personification of evil, because God destroyed Sodom, that there's not a trace of that existence. Avram's the victor. Could you imagine? He's the victor, and he says, "Tein li hanefesh v'chush kachloch." Give me the people, you take the spoils. You know, so I'm the victor. I dictate the terms. You don't dictate the terms. Give me the people, and you take the spoils. Rechush kachloch. What's going on over here? Could you imagine what the arrogance of this man was? So what does Avram say? I will not take michut v'atzroch now. Not a thread, not a bootstrap. You know why? Because you're going to say you made me wealthy. That's why. It's a chil Hashem. I would not take anything from you because you're the epitome of evil. And rather than wealth being attributed to God, you're going to take it and turn it in that you made me wealthy. But God promised that I'm going to be wealthy, unrelated to you. Therefore, I will not take as much as a thread from you, not a bootstrap. So the Gemara says, in the merit of that, we have the mitzvah of tzitzis, and we have the mitzvah of tefillin. The thread is tzitzis, and the bootstrap is leather. We merited the ritzuah shel tefillin, the strap of tefillin. So what precipitated those 2 mitzvahs? What was it rooted in? Sodom should say, God says he's going to give me wealth, and the wealth is going to be attributed to this monster, the spiritual monster over here, what he is, the king of Sodom. So because it's against the same thing, the Chil Hashem would not allow him to do it. A thread. And is anybody going to value a thread? Not even a thread. You never know. People could attribute anything I have to you. I want nothing to do with it. There shouldn't be a trace of your association with me. You know something? What is tzitzis? Urisem oso uschartem is called mitzvahs Hashem. What's innate in tzitzis? You see it, you remember all the mitzvahs. Because that was Avram's clarity. He had such clarity of God's presence. Tzitzis is that. And what's tefillin? La'osal yodecho totofes beinech. That's the sign. You, because of the way you identify, you deserve the sign which corresponds to your heart, and the sign which is on your head, which corresponds to your intelligence. That's it. But again, what was the driving force in Avram Avinu? Kiddush Hashem, Chas v'Shalom should be Chil Hashem. That's what it was. That's Avram Avinu. Now we read that by the Akedah, the Torah tells us that Avram hitched his own donkey to go to the Akedah. Now, how old was Avram at the time of the Akedah? He was 137 years old. Of course, Yitzchak was born, he was 100. Yitzchak at the time of the Akedah was 37. Vayashkim Avram baboker, he rose early. Vayachvosh es chamoro. And he hitched his donkey. A man of his age, a man of his wealth. He couldn't have had one of his slaves, one of his servants hitched a donkey. He had to do it. So the Chazal tell us, Mikan, from here we learn, Ha'ava mekalkelis shura, that love supersedes protocol. The love was so intense to do it, to ask anybody. This is so special that I do this myself. But a donkey, a filthy donkey, whatever, it doesn't matter. This is the ultimate. This is the ultimate. It's like you have people who don't understand. They said, I didn't realize you're such an archaic Jew. You still wear those phylacteries. You know, we're beyond that. So what this person sees as archaic or provincial, and where are you? You're tattooed from your neck down to your toes. You're a modern age man who's ready to spring off the World Trade Center. Nosedive, right? Your whole life is a nosedive, is a tailspin. That's what it is. Where are you going? What do you understand? Avram understood what Yosef was the viceroy of Egypt. He hitched his own chariot. Why? L'chvod Aviv. He heard his father's coming. Viceroy, the most powerful man in the world. Yosef. He was feared and revered. People see him hitching his own chariot. L'chvod Aviv. His father's coming, he hitches his own. We're not allowing anybody else to do it. Who was Yaakov? Nobody understood Yaakov the way Yosef understood who Yaakov, his father, was. Same idea. The word giant, you know, Chazal tell us about the early generations. The Lord tells us in Shabbos, Im kehemo kemalochim, anuk b'nei Adam. If we categorize the early generations as angels, we could categorize ourselves as human beings. Im hemo k'bnei Adam, if I categorize them as people, we have to be categorized as donkeys. And not even at the level of the donkey of Pinchas ben Yair. Not even at his level. We cannot fathom, we cannot understand who was Yaakov Avinu. Who was he? Well, he's a human being. He's the father of the Jewish people. The father who fathered the 12 tribes. That's who he was. Mm-hmm. He fought battles. He went to Egypt. The Nile rose because he gave a blessing. But who's Yaakov? We cannot fathom who Yaakov was. I'll give you an example. Reb Chaim Moshe Rosinski, Zecher Tzadik Levrocha, was recognized by all Jewry, Torah Jewry, as the leading Torah sage of the generation. He was known as the Rashka Bahag, Roshan Shel Kol B'nei Agola. He was the leader of all the Jews in diaspora on the Torah level. He had a memory, he forgot nothing. He had a library of 50,000 Sforim. Everything was committed to memory, like he had learned it just now. That was his memory, besides his other qualifications. When he was 13 years old, he was an orphan. So in Europe, a person had parents. Where did he stay most of the time? Stayed in shul learning, studying with other people. So he was this little boy studying, and it came to his bar mitzvah. So these people who he studied with in the Beis Medrash, the study hall, could have been his grandfather. And it was in Vilna, and they were really very substantial, significant Talmidei Chachamim. They themselves were. So they said jokingly, they said, so Chaim, did you prepare a bar mitzvah drasha? Are you going to say something? You know, you're going to be bar mitzvah now. He's just turned 13. He says, the truth is I've been learning, I didn't have time to prepare. But I'll share with you some of the things I've learned, I've just that I'm learning. So they said, okay. Gets up. He says, you know, there's a work called K'tzos HaChoshen al Choshen Nishpat, and it was the classical, in-depth work that all the yeshivas in Europe studied. And he says, look, I'm studying it. And he says, look, I'll start on this first page, and I'll tell you my different insights in what he writes there. He keeps the sefer closed, starts going through line by line by heart, things that they can imagine. There's a 13-year-old boy for 8 hours He goes through the first 30, 40 pages. This is something beyond, it's not to be imagined or fathomed, his level of genius. They never saw such a thing in their life. He's a 13-year-old boy. What does he know? Who doesn't know? What? Could you fat? So if we can't even relate to his level, his capacity of genius, you know what Yaakov Avinu was? Could we relate to what Yaakov Avinu was? Yosef, we can't relate to who Yosef was. Yosef was Ben Zukunim, Bar Chakim. He was almost a replica of his father. He looked like his father. He would have had 12 children like his father. He was the successor of his father in every sense of the word. He understood who his father was. Viceroy, no viceroy, it's irrelevant. It's all meaningless. My father comes, I hitch the chariot, I'm going to see him. Because he understood the value. Yaakov, when he gave the bracha, Ephraim and Menashe, Yosef had two sons. Ephraim was the younger, Menashe was the older. So he put Ephraim on the left side and Menashe on the right side because he was the Bechor, the firstborn. Yaakov goes, switches his hands, puts his right hand on Ephraim's head and his left hand on Menashe's head. So Yosef sees, he believes his father made a mistake. The moment he tries to lift his father's hand off Ephraim's head, Yaakov says to his son, I'm not making a mistake. I know exactly what I'm doing. Although he's younger, he will be the greater of the two. Therefore, my right hand goes on Ephraim. He tried to lift his hand. So he said to Yosef, we know that Yaakov wrestled with an angel. He fought with an angel. Whoever heard of a human being, mortal fighting with an angel? Yaakov was able to fight with an angel. And he was the victor. So he says, the hand that smashed the angel, do you think you could lift that hand off Ephraim's head? You can't lift that hand. You understand? That's what he said to Yosef. Do we even have an inkling of who these people were? We have no inkling of what they were, these people. We speak about Heinen and Merkava. They were so great that they were the location of the divine presence in existence, like the Holy of Holies. Every day, we say Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov in the Amidah. The Gemara in Brachos asks a question. The Gemara says that if you say a bracha which doesn't have Shem and Malchus, if you say a bracha, you don't say Hashem and Melech Olam, it's not a valid bracha. So the question is, the first bracha in Shemona Esrei, there's no Shem and Malchus. There's Shem, but there's no Malchus. Hashem is not mentioned as Melech. So why does the first bracha in the Amidah in the Shemona Esrei have any value? Melech is not mentioned. So the Gemara answers, when it says Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, that is the equivalent of Melech. He is the king. Because when he became Elokei Avram, what was he? Avram coronated him in the world. Where Avram was, God was with him. Avram, God is the king. Elokei Yitzchak, God is the king. Elokei Yaakov, God is the king. That's what it is. You looked at them, ordinary people. But if you understood who they were, if God's there, we're not talking about that. They had that capacity. We say V'zocheh Chazdei Avos. How many years has it been since the Avos HaKadoshim lived? We're still drawing. We're drawing their merits. Even there's a question that the Schos Avos was depleted. So there's Bris Avos, there's the common. It doesn't make a difference. How many Jews have lived throughout history? If you take, and we survived because Chazdei Avos, between the three of them, how many years did they live in combination? A few hundred years. The three of them together. They overlap. They were able to generate enough merit that the Jewish people to the end of time are able to draw from their merit account. Could we even relate to this? There's a question which is asked. Avram Avinu is 99 years old, and God puts the chesed, the hospitality of Avram, under the microscope. Whatever you did yourself, I will do directly myself. Whatever you did through an intermediary, it will come through an intermediary. So the bread was given the man comes direct. You off the shade of your tree, the clouds of glory come naturally. But the water that you only gave through a intermediary, because he didn't want to be associated with that, the Be'er Shel Miriam will come through an intermediary. Moshe will extract water from that rock. It's not going to happen naturally by itself. That's what Hashem said. Now, Avram's 99 years old. What about until this point? He was doing chesed all along. What about all the chesed he did now? Why did God put it on that microscope? Right? So simply you learn, when did Avram become the founding father of the Jewish people? When he became Avraham. When did he become Avraham? When he was circumcised. This is the first act of hospitality since he's circumcised. Now that he's the founding father of Jewish people, his actions, the ramifications of his behavior, everything forecasts what's going to be in the future. You did this, your children will have that. You did this in this manner, it will manifest itself to your children in that manner. That's the reason why. That's the simple understanding. But again, for doing hospitality, to give such rewards. So he said, you should rest under the shade of my tree. Therefore what? Is it so exceptional? I mean, if you invite somebody else and say, sit under my apple tree, or my weeping willow, up in the Catskills, do you think the clouds of glory coming to you? Or you think you're going to win the lottery, the $1 billion lottery? I don't think so. But I offered my willow tree. You think that his tree had more leaves than my tree? Definitely not. So what's it all about? So the Chofetz Chaim says something very interesting. He says, if two people do the exact act of hospitality, but one person who you host, the beneficiary, is ordinary person, and the other person you host is somebody very special, holy, Torah sage, tzaddik. Although the recipients, in terms of their physical accommodation, it's the identical physical accommodation, whose act of chesed has greater value? The act to the tzaddik, to the Torah sage, to the person who's more special. Because when you attend to his needs, God values that to a greater degree, because he's more special. There's nothing more special than a malach. Malach's holy. Avram didn't know him, malachim. Why did Avram merit to have such special guests? Because all the chesed he did in his whole life, God says, now I'm going to give you the big prize. Because of all the chesed you've done throughout your life, now you're going to get the ultimate prize. The people you're going to host, you're unaware of it, are going to be the ultimate guests. And therefore, they being beneficiaries of you, it has greater value. And it has such value, it'll carry on for generations. It will guarantee the Klal Yisrael, the Mun, the Be'er, the Anei HaKavod, the clouds of glory. That's the understanding. I'd ask the question, simple question. We say, Ava Mekalkelis is Ashura. You want to do a mitzvah, you do it yourself. You don't delegate it. Poor man comes, knocks on your door. You don't send out your butler, go give him a few dollars. To show the poor man that you value him, the head of the household goes out and here's what he has what his needs are, to make the person feel good. So Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zechar Livrocha, he was walking with somebody else before Pesach, and they have tenements on the Lower East Side. And Rav Moshe always gave this person before Pesach an envelope with money, with cash, to cover his needs, his expenses for Yom Tov. He's walking with a young person, and then Rav Moshe reminds himself that he has to walk up 5 flights, because there's no elevator in the building, to give this older person the envelope with the cash in it, with the money. So Rav Moshe says to this younger person, wait here, I'm going up, I'll walk up. So the person says, you should go up, give me the envelope, I could be up and down in 2 minutes. Moshe already was man in his 80s. You could walk up 5-6 flights to give the man the envelope. He needs the money, I'll get it to him. He says, you don't understand. Do you know what it means to that man if I deliver the envelope myself? It's a whole different reality. The concern, to the degree that I personally brought it to him, that will make his Pesach. It'll give him value. You understand? That's the sensitivity. Rav Moshe, as humble as he was, which he was very humble, he understood who he was. And he understood by him going himself, he understood what it would do to that person. He understood that. Hosting that special person, he needs the same nourishment as anybody else. But who are you nourishing? You're nourishing a very special person. Therefore, the ramifications and the outgrowth of that is something which has infinite value. He sees them, he runs, he prostrates himself. Could you imagine? Even if we had a president who was humble president, and somebody's coming to the Oval Office, somebody he wants to see, and he's a humble guy. He runs down, and that person's plane is landing in Andrew Air Force Base. Okay? He runs down, gets out of his limousine, and he prostrates himself in front of that guest and says, "Oh, I'm so happy you came. I personally will serve you in the Oval Office." Does that make sense? Doesn't make sense. He's the President of the United States. He has to prostrate himself as son of some dignitary. Whatever that dignitary is, he's not who he is. Avram Avinu, he sees these 3 wayfarers coming down the road. It's the dust. You can barely see the people. That's how hot it is. He runs. He prostrates himself. Now, who's prostrating himself? Avram is the wealthiest man, one of the wealthiest people in the world. Avram was a victor. He defeated the 4 kings. The most powerful man in the world. He was proclaimed to be Nasi Elokim. He's the Prince of God. He should prostrate himself in front of 3 wayfarers. Doesn't make any sense. What's he doing over here? But you understand, Avram knew what he was doing. More than anybody knew what he was doing. We mentioned before, Avram, besides having a personality and a genius and being able to deal with any theological question, not a question, to be most convincing, but it was even more than that. You know, I could have the best answer in the world. If you don't have the capacity to accept what I tell you, it doesn't make a difference. So how do you open up a person? You open a person if there's a trust. If there's trust between 2 individuals and you share someone and the person understands without a question, the reason why sharing with me is because it's in my best interest, that person will be totally attentive and try to apply and implement whatever the advice was, because there's that level of trust. Sometimes it takes years. I'll give you an example. This man, he had business dealings with this other friend of his for 55 years. They were through thick and thin together. His son graduates Harvard Business School, and his son comes to the business. He says, "Son, you see this man? You could trust him with your life. Anything he tells you, you accept." Okay? You think it's so easy for the son to trust him? Trust is a relationship. It builds on a relationship. Intellectually, abstractly, I understand what you're saying. But in the reality, it's not a reality. His father was too thick and thin. It's his reality that he can be trusted. The son, until he's been interacted, he saw practically what his father told him, doesn't have the same value, same impact. Doesn't have it. Now, Avram Avinu goes, prostrates himself. What is Avram Avinu trying to communicate? Monotheism. Man's a pagan. It's the wealthiest, best connected, most spiritual, a man who needs nobody. He's prostrating himself before me. The man looks at himself. He says, "What's going on over here?" do I truly have such value? That the greatest human being in the world values me such a degree that he's prostrates himself before me. He's dust in my presence. Evidently, this man must see something special within me. Must see me being special. So he says, maybe he's pulling the wool over my eyes. He's pulling, why? Maybe he wants my money. Avram needs nobody's money. Maybe he's afraid of me. Avram's afraid of no one. He's defeated the four mightiest kings. Maybe he needs followers. Avram doesn't need followers. So whatever you're going to come up, why, what the ulterior motive is, it's not there. So why is he prostrating himself? Why is he offering me his hospitality? Because evidently he really sees something which I myself don't understand why I'm so special. And if he wants to advise me, the man is open to be impressed with whatever he communicates to him. That was Avram's modus operandi, how to bring people to monotheism. It was always a sure win, without a question. Because of the profile and the persona of Avram and his renown in the world, always, as long as it makes sense, I buy it. I embrace it. I internalize it. That's the story over here. He bowed, he prostrated, he ran, he begged him. Please don't leave my presence until you've had something. I don't know you from Adam. What are you talking about? Just met. I'm not your mechutin, you understand? As they say. But Avram was that genius. He had that understanding of people. Avram, because he gave the water through an intermediary, therefore in the desert we received the water through the intermediary. It didn't come by itself. Now the question is, if he offered the bread directly and he offered everything else directly, why the water didn't he offer directly? So Rashi, why did he offer the water? So Morris says, because he was concerned that these people were idolaters, and there was a type of idolatry where they worshipped the sand. So he didn't want them tracking into his house idolatrous sand. So he says, there's a foot bath outside. The man's going to bring you water, wash your feet, then you come into my house. That's the reason why. Give the water yourself. Why did he do it through an intermediary? So I think the understanding is Avram, his whole life, fought against idolatry, paganism. It was something which is so abhorrent, something so detestable, something he cannot tolerate what it was. He didn't want to be associated to any degree. It's like a person that didn't take a shower for 6 months. He reeks from uncleanliness. So what do you see? And you see him coming down the block. You say, there's a bathhouse down the street. Go to the bathhouse. I'll pick up the tab. Then you come into my house. You don't want it. You don't want to be associated with that. Because Avram was so despised it to such a degree, even to give the water for it he didn't want. But factually, it came through an intermediary. Because God repays mida keneged mida. What you do yourself, I do myself. What you do through an intermediary, that comes through an intermediary. Therefore, as a result of that, but it's interesting, Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock. So the test, you speak to the rock, hit the rock. What about if the water would have come by itself? It would have flowed naturally out of the ground. Moshe Rabbeinu is not one of the players. It's not necessary. So maybe the whole Riva, the whole issue of the water striking the rock rather than speaking to the rock, maybe would have never happened. To be continued.